When you think of a healer, who do you think is the best healer? The best healers usually come to mind are Kuki Shinobu, Kokomi, Bennett, maybe Diano or Diona. Now, what if I told you that Jean was actually the best healer? Or rather, that she's like the best worst healer? Now, the thing with Jean is that she heals the team without them having to be on field. Now, this is something that people greatly underestimate because being off field is a very, very strong position to be in because enemies can't exactly damage your characters off field aside unless you're the Inazuma Wolves. But whatever, if you're off field, the characters that are off field are completely protected. There's no way to interact with them from enemies. And Jean does that with her Elemental Burst, literally healing the entire team. But now you're probably thinking, okay, but you always mention that an 80 cost Elemental Burst, and Jean has an 80 cost Elemental Burst. Well, no, it actually, with her Ascension 4, she gets refunded about 16 energy. So she drops from 80 energy cost to about 64 energy cost. Not to mention, Gale Blade, it has a very, very short cooldown, 6 seconds, and it generates 3 particles. You can pretty much squeeze Jean in, just tap E and leave. Like, hey, you generate particles, she can hold Favonius, and probably a good quality of Jean is that her healing scales off attack percent. Now, or attack stat. You can pretty much build Jean offensively and not suffer any decrease in her healing. Like Bennett. Like Bennett, if you want to heal more with Bennett, you gotta get more healing. Sorry, health. But if you want to increase his damage buff or his attack buff, you have to get more base attack and whatever. Like, point is, most characters usually have to most characters don't really use an offensive stat to heal unless you're Chi-Chi, but even then, if you're Chi-Chi, your healing is like strong but garbage. Now, the thing with Jean is that when you heal your entire team, her healing gets better the more characters you have in your team. Okay, so why is that? If you're healing with Jean, if Jean's the only one in your team and she heals for 20k, she heals for 20k. If you add another character, she heals for 40. If you add a third character, she heals for like oh well, did I say 40k? But if you have a full team, Jean heals for 20k each, Jean will heal for a total of 80k. This is like AoE damage versus single target damage, you know? Instead of hitting only one character or one enemy, you hit like, let's say, up to 4 enemies, and that linearly scales your damage with the more enemies there are present, or the more enemies you can hit, and that's incredibly strong. And Jean is also an animal unit, and she gets access to Viridescent Venerer, so you can heal your team with incredible potency while increasing their damage by reducing resistance of opponents. Now, that's probably the good things about Jean goes. So even though I said that she's probably like an incredible healer, why isn't she prominent in the meta? Well, that's because she kinda isn't. So here's the thing. When you have Kokomi or Kuki Shinobu, they have objectively worse healing because Kokomi can only heal the character on field unless you want to make her as a driver and heal the team that way. But that's not exactly a good portion of your time used. Kuki can only heal the character probably on field. But the difference that they make is that their Hydro, Kokomi's Hydro, and Cookie Shinobu is Electro. They both can help in Bloom and Hyper Bloom respectively. Jean can't really do that. Now, with your but what about, like, you wanna use an animal unit for the resistance down, but you don't want to use Kazuo, or you don't want to use Sucrose just because you need a healer. Well, I mean, Jean's obviously gonna fulfill that position, that spot, but like, that's an incredibly niche. There's no reason you're gonna really pick Jean over Kazuo or Sucrose just because Jean has more healing. Most of the time, even if you needed the healing, other characters can do probably the same thing, but probably better. Diona, if you're putting Diona in Ayaka Freeze, or in in Ayaka Freeze, Diona would be far better as a healer, an inner archetype healer, because she applies a cryo, is also cryo unit, and allows for the double cryo, and gives a shield and gives and healing. The thing is, you can just move somebody out of that position. You can just put Kazuo at that point, and you'll get way better damage potential out of Kazuo or Sucrose rather than, well, Jean. Jean can't really be used in Dendro because what do you offer other than resistance shred? Well, nothing. And yeah, pretty much the biggest problem with Jean is that she leans so much in her healing and to her job as a healer that she can only basically heal. It's the same thing with, like, say, Zhongli. Zhongli has so much defensive utility that you really sacrifice offensive utility, Like, say what you want, but there will always be a better character to support the team other than Zhongli or Jean, They're both kind of similar in that aspect. Jean has an overwhelming amount of healing, Zhongli has an overwhelming amount of a shield. But in the end, both are outdone by, say, Kazuha, Sucrose, I don't know, maybe Nahida. but when you're just trying to deal damage, both of the characters, they don't really do that much. And so you really run into the three, you're running the same place as Zhongli. If you can, say, beat Abyss or any hard content with 3 characters of your choice, Jean is actually pretty good. But yeah, that's really just it. She doesn't do anything else. She just heals, she just reduces resistance, and that's it. You think she'd have a spot because of her healing, but sometimes maybe her healing's a little too much, and she has no other utility other than that. And yeah, Jean is a character I really like, but yeah, no, she's literally my comfort pick. She's a Zhongli whenever I use as a support defense character, whatever. She's pretty much my Zhongli, because healing your entire team unconditionally is omega comfy and way better than having to set up a shield. Because Zhongli, you have to press E, you have to wait for the shield to come up, and yeah. And you say I'm a freaking meta slave, man. Yeah, I think Jean's pretty much like one of my favorite characters. But oh man, she's not good in today's meta. And yeah, I mean, even I would actually say that Zhongli's probably way better. No, why Jean slander? But yeah, you can use Zhongli for spread. You can't swirl Dendro with Anmo. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me. See ya.